Hey guys, my name is Shirley and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing with you guys 7 tips that have helped me read over 50 books this year. Now, let me start off by prefacing that I am not like a crazy big reader. Like, there's so many people who read way more books than this, but I just wanted to share a few tips from the perspective of an average Joe, somebody who's working a full-time job, somebody who has, who's juggling multiple things, but yet who's been able to, achieve their reading target. All right, so tip number 1 that I would recommend is to utilize different reading platforms. So personally, I read physical books, as you can see from my little bookshelf here. I also read on my Kindle. I also listen to audiobooks, and I also read like on my phone or my iPad using the Kindle app. And I just find using different platforms helps me get through more books. So many of us are living such busy lives and we don't always have time to physically pull out a physical book, sit down and like read for 5 hours a day or whatnot. Like, that just isn't reality. So when you have different reading platforms, I find you can slot in reading times at different times depending on what's most practical. So for instance, when I'm cleaning the house, let's say it's going to take me like an hour to clean the house, or it's going to take me like an hour to do the groceries, I'll listen to an audiobook, and that way like I'm still consuming knowledge while I'm also doing another task. Or for instance, when I go to bed, I like to turn off my lights, and I don't like to fiddle with like a big clunky physical book in bed. So when I go to bed, it's most easier for me to pull out my Kindle because it's got a backlight there, so I don't need to have the lights on, and I don't have to like maneuver a big book when I'm like laying on my side or whatnot. So having different reading platforms so that you can call upon the specific way that you want to read at that particular time, I found has been quite helpful. The next tip that I would have is to let go of the pride that's associated with listening to books. Like, I used to be that person who used to think that if I was listening to an audiobook, I was cheating. I used to feel like if we're having a conversation about, let's say, Atomic Habits, and I knew I didn't physically read the Atomic Habits book, but I listened to it on Audible, I used to feel so guilty, and then I'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't actually read it, I just listened to it. That's cheating. That doesn't count as reading. But honestly, just get rid of that mindset. Just throw it in the bin. You don't need that mindset at all. For all transparency, this year I've been able to get through 51 books, and I'd say maybe only 20 of those I read physically. If I wasn't listening to these books on Audible, I would have only gotten through 20 books, but because I was willing to listen to some on audiobook, I've been able to get through 51 books. So it's a matter of, do you want to hold on to your pride and just go through 20 books, or are you gonna ditch that pride or the shame that's associated with listening to an audiobook and just consume more knowledge? Are you prioritizing more actual practice of physically reading a book, or are you more prioritizing the act of consuming knowledge in whatever form that takes? So personally, I have found Audible really helps out a lot. I also listen to my books at 2 times speed. You don't have to do that, but I find when I listen to 2 times speed, I'm able to go through books a lot quicker. Let's say if it's a 20-hour book, if I listen to it on 2 times speed, I'm able to get through it in 10 hours, and voila, I can move on to the next book. So hot tip there as well. Next tip that I would have is to read different genres. I'd say prior to this year, I pretty much predominantly just read personal development, self-help books, and it's only this year or the latter part of last year that I started getting into other genres like romance and fantasy, and I found I read so much more when I read different genres. I find I get bored. Like, if I'm just reading romance like from January to December, I'm gonna get bored of romance. If I'm just reading personal development all month long, I'm gonna get bored. So I need to read different genres for me to keep wanting to read different texts. And it's like with anything in life, right? Like when you watch TV shows or when you watch a movie, you don't just watch comedy TV shows like from January to December. You watch action, you watch fantasy, you watch different things. Or even when it comes to eating food, we don't eat the same meal each and every single day. So I really recommend reading different genres, tapping into different things. Sometimes it's not that you don't want to read, it's just that you don't want to read the same thing that you've been reading over and over again. The next tip that I would have is to switch out non-essential tasks for reading time. The number one excuse that people give for not reading is that they say that they're too busy. I don't have time, I'm so busy, I've got this, that, da, da, da. And yeah, a lot of us do live busy times, but if you really do an audit of your life, you will find there's some things that you can actually switch out for reading time. I think it was the month of Feb. Month of Feb was like a big reading month for me. I think I read like 11 books in the month of Feb. That was like such a good month. And in that month, I noticed I wasn't even watching TV. Like, I'm not saying like cut out all your TV or whatnot, but I was just so engrossed in reading and I was really loving the things that I was reading that I didn't even watch TV. I think, yeah, I went literally weeks without turning on my TV, and it's just like, wow, I got through so much books because of that. So look at things that are maybe time wasters or things that aren't so essential in your life that you can switch out. And another thing that's also like a good wake-up call is to look at your screen time on your phone. Like a lot of people, I'm sure you'll be surprised by the amount of screen time that you have on your phone. Maybe 3 hours, maybe it's 6 hours, maybe it's 8 hours. I don't know what your screen time looks like, but a lot of that I'm pretty sure is going to be allocated to social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok or whatnot. So switch out an hour of Instagram or TikTok for reading and see how you go with that. Next tip that I have is to utilize Goodreads. So if you don't know, Goodreads is like a reading app community tracker thing. I am not doing justice of explaining it at all, but I'll show it on the screen here. What I really love about Goodreads is there's this feature where it allows you to set a target for the year. So for me, at the start of this year, I had a target of reading 50 books. And so it kind of shows you each year how you're tracking against that. So every time that you log in a book as started reading or finished reading, it tells you like, oh, you're either on track to hitting your yearly goal or you're 6 books behind. I'm a goal-oriented person and I work better when I have a target that I'm working towards. So for me, saying I have the goal of reading 50 books this year was much more beneficial rather than just saying the goal of I want to read more. So having a set target really helped me, and being able to track that on Goodreads was very helpful. I also found Goodreads helpful in terms of actually choosing what books that I wanted to read. So sometimes I'd hear about a book and then I'd go on Goodreads, I'd look at the reviews, I'd see how many stars that it got, I'd read like the summary of the book, and then that would tell me if that's a book that I'm going to be interested in or whatnot. So it's a good way also to kind of do like a bit of a sneak peek and see if you're going to be interested in a book before you start reading it. Another thing is it's got a really good community feature as well. I don't really have many friends on Goodreads. I think I have like maybe 2 people that are my friends on Goodreads. But essentially you can like follow people so you can see what they're reading, you can see how they're tracking against their goal, you can see like how many stars that they've given different books. So the community feature is quite cool. Next tip that I have is do not be afraid to DNF. DNF I believe stands for do not finish. Do not be afraid to DNF or put down a book. Like so many of us get stuck in the old belief that if you pick up a book, you have to read it from start to end and you can't move on until you finished it. Like that is something that I think we learn from school. Like a lot of us, you know, at school you allocated a book, you have to read it, you have to analyze it, blah 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 blah. But then we don't have to apply that same approach in our personal lives. Like if you pick up a book and you're not enjoying it, you've really tried, you've put in the effort to get into it, but it's just not vibing with you, put it down and move on. Let's say I've picked up Atomic Habits and I've been trying to get into it for the past 2 months and it's just not happening, and I keep forcing myself. That's 2 months that I've wasted on this book, whereas I could have put it down a month ago and then picked up something else that I liked and gotten through that. So if you're not vibing with a book, don't feel guilty for not finishing it. And remember, you can always pick up the book again a bit later on. Like sometimes it's not that you hate the book, it's just maybe you're not in the right frame of mind or it's not the right time. Like there's so many books that I put down, like let's say in March or Feb, but then I picked them up again in October and I read them and I loved them. So sometimes it's just not the right time. So put it down and you can always come back and read it a bit later. And then the last tip that I have for you guys is to follow other readers or follow like reading accounts or book talkers or whatnot. And the reason why I say this is because community plays such a big part into shaping who we are as people. You know, it's like that quote that says you're like the sum of the top 5 people you spend time with or blah 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 blah. So like let's say majority of the people in your circle don't read, you might not be as inclined to read. So this is when platforms like social media really come in handy, because if you're lacking that, let's say in your physical community, you can build a virtual social community that's centered around what you want. I extend the same approach to like personal finances. Like let's say the people around you don't really know much about personal finances or you don't have transparent conversations about personal finances, then go online, find people who you vibe with, that you connect with, and follow those people and then build your virtual community there. So I'd extend that to I'd extend that same approach to books as well and reading. I found following people who were interested in like the same type of books that I was in and did book reviews and book recaps and all that kind of stuff was really, really helpful, because like I got to get ideas of other books that are like really interesting or books that I would enjoy. So it's like a good way to get suggestions. I also like knew that these people had different like familiar styles to to me, so if they recommended something, I knew that I most likely was going to enjoy it. It also challenges you as well. Like for instance, Rachel Catherine, absolutely love her. She's like my favorite YouTuber. She reads like so many books a month, and like seeing her do like her recaps of her books like pushes me as well to want to read more and like really get into books. And yeah, the more you hear people talking about books, the more you hear about book reviews and this book and that, the more you're like inclined to want to read more. Alright folks, that is a wrap for today's video. I hope you guys have picked up a few tips and tricks that will help you get through a few more books or hit your reading targets. With that being said, I would really appreciate any book recommendations. I am setting again next year a goal to read another 50 books, so I would really love to hear your recommendations of books that you've enjoyed. Anyway guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. With all that being said and done, dream big, keep well and hustle hard. I'll catch you again in the next one.